Hello everyone, a big welcome or welcome back to my channel. So as many of you will know, I absolutely adore poetry. I started really getting into reading poetry a couple of years ago, and now it's something that I truly couldn't do without in my reading. It's such a special part of my reading life and just my life generally. One of my favourite things to do in the world is to read poetry aloud to anyone that will listen. This job usually falls to my husband, Cameron, who is a very good listener. So I've been thinking about filming this kind of video for you guys for a while, just sitting down and reading to you some of my favourite ever poems by some of my favourite ever poets. This video won't be for everyone, I'm sure. I totally get that. But if you love poetry like I do, if you love hearing poetry read aloud, if you're interested in hearing some of my personal favourites, then I really hope you'll enjoy this video as much as I'm going to enjoy filming it. So today I'm going to be reading for you 7 poems ranging from the mid-1800s up to the past couple of years. This list is not exhaustive. I have so many other favourite poems that I could read to you. I just think these ones represent a nice range of poems. I'm going to read them in no particular order. I will also say a few words after each poem to explain when I first read the poem and why I love it so much. I would love it if you would comment down below as we go and tell me which of these poems are your favourite. Are any of them new to you? Do you have any poetry recommendations for me? All poetry chat more than welcome down below in the comments. Let's do some poetry reading. I'm going to try my very best. Blackberry Picking by Seamus Heaney. Late August, given heavy rain and sun for a full week, the blackberries would ripen. At first, just one, a glossy purple clot, among others, red, green, hard as a knot. You ate that first one, and its flesh was sweet, like thickened wine. Summer's blood was in it, leaving stains upon the tongue and lust for picking. Then red ones inked up, and that hunger sent us out with milk cans, pea tins, jam pots, where briars scratched and wet grass bleached our boots. Round hayfields, cornfields, and potato drills, we trekked and picked until the cans were full, until the tinkling bottom had been covered with green ones, and on top big dark blobs burned like a plate of eyes. Our hands were peppered with thorn pricks, our palms sticky as bluebeards. We hoarded the fresh berries in the byre, but when the bath was filled we found a fur, a rat-grey fungus, glutting on our cash. The juice was stinking too. Once off the bush, the fruit fermented, the sweet flesh would turn sour. I always felt like crying. It wasn't fair that all the lovely canfuls smelt of rot. Each year I hoped they'd keep, knew that they would not. So this is a strong contender for one of my favourite poems of all time. Every time I read it, I get super emotional. I only properly discovered Seamus Heaney's poems this year. I'd read the odd poem of his before in other anthologies. He is a much acclaimed Irish poet. He won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1995, and I am in awe of everything he does. I love the natural imagery in his poems. He often writes about childhood, which is quite reminiscent of my rural childhood in some ways, so the poems resonate with me quite strongly. I love the grounding to his poems, the real connection with nature and the earth, the physical and metaphorical roots, but also at the same time the higher, intelligent, more emotional tinge to the poems. This poem in particular is just glorious. It really speaks to the bittersweetness of childhood and innocence and good times and good memories and the loss that comes along with that. It's perfection. Rooms by John McCullough. There it was again, the softness of your voice, the cushioned spaces of its hesitance, that constant search for the right way to question yourself. We'd met on Hove Prom by luck. You talked and I rested in your little rooms. So much sky, so many wanderers, we were already in a dream. Now I walk past beach huts, backwash, with no chance of stumbling into you again. There is only the silence of clouds, the air between shuffled pebbles, the gaps I listen for inside the rain. So I first read this collection, Spacecraft, a few years ago when I was first really getting into contemporary poetry. And to this day, this is still one of the best poetry collections I have ever read. John McCullough explores themes of human relationships and queerness and illness and love so perceptively, so beautifully. One of the things I particularly love about his poems is his wordplay. It is always so clever and playful and layered. Really, the only way to experience all of that in its entirety is to read this collection as a whole. But in terms of this poem in particular, I just love the softness to it, but also the streak of pain that runs through it. The imagery in here of vastness and possibility, but also the cushioning and comfort that attentiveness and words can bring. I love what this man does with words and imagery, just sublime. Caged Bird by Angelou. A free bird leaps on the back of the wind and floats downstream till the current ends and dips his wing in the orange sun rays and dares to claim the sky. But a bird that stalks down his narrow cage can seldom see through his bars of rage. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. The caged bird sings with a fearful trill of things unknown but longed for still, and his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom. The free bird thinks of another breeze, and the trade winds soft through the sighing trees, and the fat worms waiting on a dawn-bright lawn, and he names the sky his own. But a caged bird stands on the grave of dreams, his shadow shouts on a nightmare scream, his wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. The caged bird sings with a fearful trill of things unknown but longed for still, and his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom. This is just one of those classic poems whose brilliance cannot be disputed, in my opinion. All of Maya Angelou's words are filled with such intention and beauty and grace. This poem in particular, but really this whole collection, is so urgent and necessary and transformative. For those of you who may not know, Maya Angelou was a Black American woman and an esteemed author. As well as being a poet, she was also the author of I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, her famous memoir. Her work primarily explores her experiences with racism and poverty and violence and motherhood. I will always be touched by her work. I will always be touched by this poem in particular. She evokes such a strong emotional reaction with her words. It's totally beautiful. The Boy Tiresias by Tempest. Watch him, kicking a tennis ball, keeping it up, the boy on the street in his sister's old jumper. Watch him, absorbed in the things that he does. Crouch down, observing the worms and the slugs. He's shaping their journeys, placing his leaves in their paths, playing with fate. God cub, sucking on sherbet, riding his bike in the sunlight. Filmic, perfect. But one day he'll be hunchbacked, riddled with pain, desperate for love but too weak to enjoy it, mumbling at strangers on trains. How strange that when we have youth, we're so keen to destroy it. We do not choose but follow blindly. We do not own, just sometimes carry. We do not make, we undertake to be more alive each day we wake. And this is a must, and the days are all dust, and the only thing worse than losing the trust of a lover is finding the rust in their kiss. He will live longer than all of his passions, but for now he is young still, and everything's his. Because the boy will grow up makes him no less innocent. Watch him, staring at what doesn't bore him, son of himself. All things are his moons. He can even now feel his destiny calling. He holds it to his chest, like a dressing to a wound. Man, that is so fun to read aloud. Now, I have to say that that poem in particular was a very hard one to pick because this whole collection is stunning. My favourite poem from this collection is actually the opening poem, but it is pages and pages and pages long, so I thought I would save you all from that. So this collection is based off of the myth of Tiresias, and it uses Tiresias's journey and story to explore broad themes of childhood and womanhood and manhood, as well as sex and gender and community and poverty. I read this collection for the first time last year, and it made it into my favourite books of the year. Tempest's poetry is honestly in another league. The way they weave together classical myth and social commentary and autobiography is totally flawless. The collection manages to feel so age-old but totally contemporary at the same time. I love reading these poems aloud. While I love all of the things that the poems are exploring, I just love their use of rhythm and rhyme. It elevates the whole reading experience so much. This poetry is so beautiful and impactful. It really makes me think. I love it so much. Life by Charlotte Bronte. Life, believe, is not a dream, so dark as sages say. Oft a little morning rain foretells a pleasant day. Sometimes there are clouds of gloom, but these are transient all. If the shower will make the roses bloom, oh why lament its fall? Rapidly, merrily, life's sunny hours flit by. Gratefully, cheerily, enjoy them as they fly. What though death at times steps in and calls our best away? What though sorrow seems to win o'er hope a heavy sway? Yet hope again elastic springs, unconquered though she fell. Still buoyant are her golden wings, still strong to bear us well. Manfully, fearlessly, the day of trial bear, for gloriously, victoriously, can courage quell despair. So, a cute story about this one. I'd heard this poem around here and there, but I only first properly read it and paid attention to it a couple of years ago when I was reading a poem for every day of the year. And this one actually came up on my granddad's birthday, which I just thought was so lovely and perfect. This poem is simplicity and beauty at its best. It never fails to put a smile on my face. Honestly, I think this one speaks for itself. Little Redcap by Carol and Duffy. At childhood's end, the houses petered out into playing fields, the factory allotments kept like mistresses by kneeling married men, the silent railway line, the hermit's caravan, till you came at last to the edge of the woods. It was there that I first clapped eyes on the wolf. He stood in a clearing, reading his verse out loud in his wolfy drawl, a paperback in his hairy paw, red wine staining his bearded jaw. What big ears he had, what big eyes he had, what teeth! In the interval, I made quite sure he spotted me, sweet 16, never been, babe, waif, and bought me a drink, my first. You might ask why. Here's why. Poetry. The wolf I knew would lead me deep into the woods, away from home, to a dark, tangled, thorny place lit by the eyes of owls. I crawled in his wake, my stockings ripped to shreds, scraps of red from my blazer snagged on twig and branch, murder clues. I lost both shoes, but got there, wolf's lair, better beware. Lesson 1 that night, breath of the wolf in my ear, was the love poem. I clung till dawn to his thrashing fur, for what little girl doesn't dearly love a wolf? Then I slid from between his heavy matted paws and went in search of a living bird, white dove, which flew straight from my hands into his open mouth. One bite, dead. How nice, breakfast in bed, he said, licking his chops. As soon as he slept, I crept to the back of the lair, where a whole wall was crimson, gold, aglow with books. Words were truly alive on the tongue, in the head, warm, beating, frantic, winged, music and blood. But then I was young, and it took 10 years into the woods to tell that a mushroom stoppers the mouth of a buried corpse, that birds are the uttered thought of trees, that a greying wolf howls the same old song at the moon, year in, year out, season after season, same rhyme, same reason. I took an axe to a willow to see how it wept. I took an axe to a salmon to see how it leapt. I took an axe to the wolf as he slept, one chop, scrotum to throat, and saw the glistening virgin white of my grandmother's bones. I filled his old belly with stones. I stitched him up. Out of the forest I come with my flowers, singing, all alone. Carol and Duffy will always be one of my favourite ever poets. You've probably gathered by now that I like a dependable rhythm to my poems. I love sound and dissonance and rhyme. Carol Ann Duffy writes such solid, imagery-evoking, emotive, beautiful, daring, scathing poetry. She just has it all. This collection is filled with retellings of famous stories and myths and legends, all from the female perspective, and it is just a feminist joy. Little Redcap in particular combines that familiar childhood story, the familiar childlike rhyme scheme, with the scathing social commentary of the world we live in. The jarring feeling that this creates while you read just stops you in your tracks. This poem is highly intelligent, it's kick-ass, and it'll never get old. CANOPY by Emily Berry. The weather was inside. The branches trembled over the glass as if to apologise. Then they thumped and they came in. And the trees shook everything off until they were bare and clean. They held onto the ground with their long feet and leant into the gale and back again. This was their way with the wind. They flung us down and flailed above us with their visions and their pale tree light. I think they were telling us to survive. That's what a leaf feels like, anyway. We lay under their great awry display and they tattooed us with light. They got inside us and made us speak. I said my first word in their language, CANOPY. I was crying and it felt like I was feeding. Be my mother, I said to the trees in the language of trees, which can't be transcribed, and they shook their hair back and they bent low with their many arms and they looked into my eyes as only trees can look into the eyes of a person. They touched me with the rain on their fingers till I was all droplets, till I was mist, and they said they would. What I love most about this poem and this collection as a whole is the stunning, fresh, wet, vivid, natural imagery and how it plays so well into themes of childhood loss and grief and longing. The water imagery throughout this collection is stunning. Imagery of the sea and oceans and tears recurs throughout. This really gives the poems a sense of fluidity and movement, and that's also really mirrored in the poem's rhythm. I found this poem to be so clear and raw and beautiful. I love the sense of connection it ends up with, and also the slight tint of hope. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. So there we have some of my favourite poems by my favourite poets, read by me. Thank you so much if you've watched to the end of this video. Thank you so much for giving me the space to read these poems and to spread their joy. It honestly means so much to me. I really hope you enjoyed. Please, please let me know down below in the comments if you did. That would make my day. And of course, please let me know what some of your favourite poems are. I will be checking all of them out. Thank you again, guys. I really hope you're all doing well. I can't wait to chat to you, and I will hopefully see you very soon in another video. Bye.